So we have now gone through the three major projects underway at the Reagan-Udall Foundation this year. As I mentioned earlier, these fit within three pillars with an emphasis coming on the capacity building pillar, developing more scientific expertise to address all of these kinds of issues and more. So there will be more coming up in the year ahead, building on this foundation. But we wanted to provide a framework, an overall framework, and description of the specific activities right now. That ends the overview of the board activities plus the project descriptions. What I'd like to do now is open the meeting up not just to comments on these specific projects, but to any other questions or comments that you all might have. Again, there will be other opportunities for input as you hear more about the further development of these and the next Reagan-Udall Foundation projects through our website, through our staff, through our future public meetings, and through the meetings associated with each of these projects. As you heard from Troy, there's a conference coming up on the IMED's OMOP methods. There will be, and we'll announce them, further activities related to these other projects, so more to come there. But this is a good chance for us to get feedback from all of you, or questions answered from, or not opportunity to answer questions from all of you about anything else going on with the foundations, or any broader suggestions you might have about next steps for Reagan-Udall. Lisa, please.
Just want to let you know that from the FDA's perspective, we're excited about all of these projects, very excited about your plans. These are all critical public health problems that can benefit literally millions and millions of people, as you heard from Alicia and others. And we want to thank the board and particularly the staff for all of their work on these projects and all the work I know is upcoming in the next year. This is just phenomenally important work, and we appreciate it.
Yeah, I'd like to add a special thanks to the staff as well. All of you have been doing a tremendous amount of work on limited resources and very much a ramp-up phase for the foundation. It's hard to accomplish on multiple counts, but it's really nice to see all the progress. Comments or questions from Josh? Please go ahead. And I know you already identified yourself, but just one more time in case people forgot.
Yeah, I'm Joshua Charlaine. I represent myself. And I guess what I'd like to begin is just kind of reminding everyone what Dr. McClellan said earlier about the need for better evidence, better science, how to improve scientific capacity. And kind of with that theme, I'd like to suggest maybe describe a problem and present or suggest an opportunity for the Reagan-Udall Foundation. And the problem that I observed when I worked at FDA and working with regulated industry is that you have two groups that are very much mutually dependent on one another, but the reality of it is they really don't understand what each other does. So it's very clear that regulated companies really don't know what reviewers do with their information. And I think it's also, there's a lot of evidence that the reverse is also true, that FDA reviewers don't really understand the complexity and the problems it takes to prepare a submission. And certainly there's a lot going on to address that problem. I mean, FDA is pumping out a huge number of guidance documents, some of which I think are excellent. But I think there are other opportunities, and I really see this problem as a barrier to innovation and job creation. I mean, I talk to a lot of people who would like to submit a product for FDA approval, but they're basically intimidated by it. And what I'm saying is, I think that's really an unfortunate circumstance, because I don't think it really needs to be that way. Because I think the work of each party is understandable by the other party. I think it's possible for reviewers to get a better understanding of the problems of industry, and I think it's possible for industry to better understand what goes on at FDA. So So that's kind of the theme, so to speak, of my suggestion for what the Reagan-Udall Foundation could maybe get involved in. And I have a couple of ideas that I wrote down. Let's see, one would be to, and I know these aren't as global as, iMeds or maybe as important as cardiotoxicology.
Projects have to start somewhere.
Yeah, have to start somewhere. And so one idea that would be to create a web-based tool for FDA and sponsors to track the evolution and resolution of problems associated with a submission. There's just massive amounts of miscommunication, same question being asked and answered repeatedly or over and over, or sometimes over and over again. Evaluate software tools designed to help reviewers speed up the examination of data. There's a huge effort going on at FDA with reviewer tools, but maybe it's going on, I haven't seen it. There's really no communication outward, like these are the tools that we're using, this is why we like them, this is what we're doing, and a lot of that's developed in the public domain. I don't know, maybe those tools could be made available to industry. I know they would be, I think they'd really like that. Another idea is to develop case studies about responding to questions from reviewers. That's something that industry doesn't do a very good job on. And I worked on a project once that with Booz Allen that looked at a lot of submissions over a period of years, and I was absolutely shocked at the percentage of times reviewers were asking the same question 5 times. Now, I don't think people would believe that, but it's true, and I think there's another major opportunity. And I think there's more mundane things. Data standards are coming up fast and furious. I think everyone's predicting by maybe 2015, no longer are there, will paper submissions be permitted. And there's massive confusion out there with regard to data standards. I mean, number one, it's kind of a moving target. That's not helping. But there's not too many people out there who understand what they are. And when that deadline hits, there's going to be a lot of anxiety. So anyway, those are some ideas. So the idea is to acknowledge the mutual dependency between FDA and regulated industry. And FDA is dependent on regulated industry because if you're going to hit a PDUFA goal, you need a high quality submission. And I know that's probably the most frustrating things for reviewers, to get a submission which is a little shaky in the quality area. So anyway, those are my ideas. Tackle that idea of acknowledging the mutual dependency and working on improving communication and understanding between the two groups.
Josh, thanks very much for the comment and your articulation of some of these important issues. It does give us some things to think about. Would emphasize we don't do regulation here, but we definitely want better science and the best possible scientific methods applied in regulatory processes. Other comments?
So my name's Ross Felice. I'm from the FDA. I'm in the Office of the Chief Scientist, which is one of the central sort of scientific offices. And I just wanted to make a comment. We have a project right now, a pilot project. We're about 9 months in, evaluating the value of social media data and other user-generated data for post-market surveillance safety activities. There's certainly a lot of other people in this space, and we try and keep in touch with as many of the outside and academic groups who are working on that, but I just wanted to sort of bring that to the boards and to everyone's attention. So
Thanks very much, Ross. You'll be hearing from us.
Yes, again, I'm Frank Weichholt, and I have a comment actually to Josh. You're right and you're wrong in that industry doesn't know what the FDA requires. It differs, right? Those who have the resources, they pretty much know what the regulator. Sorry, those who have the resources, and I'm talking particularly about big pharma, they do very well know what the regulator requires because of their history of interactions. But you're also right in that smaller companies, particularly with the lack of resources, don't necessarily do the research and finding out exactly about the regulatory process. And that's not because it's not public or not public enough or because it's not available, because it's a relatively transparent process. It's a question of analyzing it and drawing the right conclusions and taking the right steps. Nevertheless, the quest for forming strategic alliance between stakeholders such as industry and regulatory agencies, including other stakeholders like patients and healthcare providers and payers, is certainly a great opportunity where the foundation has to play a key role. But one of the questions that I think is not addressed yet, because the FDA plays such a critical role in it, what are the options and opportunities for the foundation to support with resources or augment the resources that go into this effort from the FDA? Because the FDA is not structured or funded to branch out primarily into research. And as much as regulatory science is a priority of the agency, and as much as the agency has become a science-driven agency, it's not structured and not funded appropriately. So I think the decision by the Congress to establish this foundation is critical. But there are some missing steps, because right now we don't have a good way to get resources into the agency without conflict of interest. So that would be something that I would be interested in learning about.
Great, Frank. I think that's an issue that will, certainly the underlying concern that you expressed about the need for more support and activity around regulatory science issues is critical. It's something that we hear about from the FDA. It's something we hear about from all outside stakeholders. It's what's driving the projects that you heard about today and the sort of the big picture, the plans for the future. We do have some very careful policies that we tried to put in place thoughtfully regarding how funding can come from these activities and how it can be overseen to make sure, as I said at the outset, that we remain about the research and developing the science, and that we have no authority and no connection to FDA regulatory activities directly. So I think we're all about the same goal. We just need to be as careful and thorough in how we go about addressing it so that we can have the most impact possible, and very much appreciate the input, and obviously we're going to keep working on these core issues of how do we do as much as possible to support the science that the FDA needs.
I just want to add to that, we are not advisory, so that's clear, that's in the statute. However, the regulatory science questions, the big questions that the agency has, whether it's toxicology or these vexing issues that have to be dealt with that are public-private, are really a very good vehicle for Reagan-Udall, and that's one thing that we are looking at. And now that we're kind of established, we have our priorities, we have the capacity to do a lot of these projects that are in the public domain and that are of interest to all stakeholders. But again, we have to separate anything that would be advisory to the FDA. That is not our core function, but anything for the public good is, or supports the science of the agency, is in our domain.
Bill?
Yeah. I think the foundation is gratified to hear all these other suggestions, and I think they're all worthy of consideration. I think it's important to perhaps think of the foundation as an organization in its early stages in evolution, that in fact it's in many ways a startup, trying to take a number of key projects that we think are important, that have potential impact to understand a number of issues in the entire system, but also the key is for us to deliver on the projects. And so as limited as the scope may be, I think it's very important for all of us to remember that with limited budget, if we don't deliver here, then I think the hope of getting other funding will also be limited. We certainly have all the intention in the world to deliver, and I think it's very important for all of us to keep an eye on that, to make sure that these projects are successful.
Thanks. And with these now fairly substantial projects being established, we're trying to develop some models that can be applied to other key problems like the ones that Frank, you and others have described today. Again, we're going to keep working on this, and we very much value the input and want further suggestions on how we can best focus our efforts. We have to be brief.
I'm sorry, but I have to make a follow-up comment on that. And just to be very specific, a lot of the work is critically dependent on the engagement of the regulator. Capacity that is required to make those projects successful from the agency in a non-conflict of interest, because it's a very broad and general question. It's not addressing one particular part of the industry, right? They're very general questions. But the agency is not funded to do that. And we need a solution for that, because otherwise your concern is true. There will be no delivery. Why? Because critical elements are missing, namely that information that's sitting and the expertise that's sitting at the FDA, right? So we need to unveil that.
Certainly a lot of expertise there. And I don't know if Lisa wants to mention, but we have a coordinating committee process with the FDA to help identify these best opportunities and hopefully channel in some of that tremendous FDA expertise on these important scientific questions.
We do. And Frank, in fact, sits on that committee.
Yeah.
We have a new process in place to coordinate and collaborate across the agency. Every major component of the agency is represented on that coordinating committee. And in that group, we discuss best uses of Reagan-Udall. We make sure that FDA, in fact, staffs each and every Reagan-Udall project. So I believe there's appropriate expertise currently, and if there's not, I expect to hear about it, and I will fix it. And not just on the ongoing projects, but on planning them and making sure that they hit the very high benefit, important public health crises, so that the deployment of the limited Reagan-Udall resources and the deployment of the limited FDA resources hits those areas most likely to produce the best public health benefit.
Thanks. Any other comments or questions?
Hi, my name is Stephanie Beasley. I write for Inside Health Policy. Actually wanted to know if you could elaborate a little bit on the food safety project, the proposal for that. What are some of the issues that I guess could fall under that, or what's being considered at this time?
There are a lot of issues in that general area. I don't want to necessarily look at Pam, but FDA has identified a few priorities. I think this gets to issues of limited resources and our ability to staff them up quickly. Lisa, do you want to comment? Or
Absolutely. One of the ways that we ensure that Reagan-Udall, not that it couldn't do it by itself, but one of the ways we work with Reagan-Udall to ensure that we're hitting the really high value public health issues is to provide them on a irregular basis a set of our public health priorities that are vetted by the commissioner so that they're certain that it represents the agency priorities. And there's several food projects on that. My understanding is you're working with the Office of Foods to further hone what would be of interest to some of the outside stakeholders, because this isn't just about what FDA thinks is high value. This has to be about what all the relevant stakeholders think is high value.
As you know, with FSMA implementation, that's been the top priority of FDA over the past year, and particularly as we look at these projects and what might make most sense, we want to be sure they're aligned with FSMA priorities and funding within FDA, and where best can Reagan-Udall target its resources to make a difference. And I think Lisa would agree that we're at a point now where both the implementation path on FSMA is becoming more clear, and the funding situation at FDA is becoming more clear. So in the next year, we're certainly going to be in a position to target specific projects.
So I just
Those
wanted-
discussions are ongoing, and thank you
Yeah.
for all your work on that.
I just want to state two things that are obvious and very important. We do need to do food and other projects. The issue is, as Bill said, is implementation and resources and doing them properly. So having said that, and that continues to be a challenge, but I think now we're really getting ready to take on a few more things and do them well. The other thing that is important for everyone to know is we don't take on anything without the FDA's approval. So we are, our charter is very clear. So when we take on something and we think it's important, it's collaborative with the FDA. So that's very important.
And that's from the very early planning stages, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate that.
Any other, sorry, go ahead, Sally.
Thanks, Mark. I noticed that Mark turned to an industry person when the issue of food safety came up, but I want to make
turn
sure
to the recipe
I
as
want to
well.
make sure that the people who are here understand that as a consumer organization, the National Consumers League, which I have a seat on this body as well, is very concerned about food safety. And the Food Safety and Modernization Act, which is FSMA, that Pam referred to, is an ongoing concern for consumer organizations. And we will we work already very closely with the FDA on implementation of FSMA, and we'll be here to make sure that whatever Reagan-Udall does is in the best interest of consumers as well.
Thank you very much. This is illustrating exactly where this priority should head, and you see the strong commitment of the board to do more work in this area in close collaboration with the FDA and all of our stakeholders. Any other questions or comments?
One of the things I wanted to kind of chime in on was our use of resources. And one of the things that's probably not apparent to you, but for those of us working with Reagan-Udall, is that we're really a different kind of organization. We work with a combination of employees, part-time contractors, full-time contractors, people detailed from NIH, people detailed from FDA. And so as we go forward, and I don't think that's going to change. I mean, certainly we have limited resources right now, but as we move forward, I really envision that to be an ongoing structure. It's not as neat and tidy as you might like it, but it does represent a public-private collaboration, and I think that we will continue, and that is a way to leverage our resources by utilizing that. And now with OMOP being part of this, there's actually some folks that are seconded from industry for part of their time, one in the back of the room. And so we are actually getting labor from industry as well. And so we're trying to utilize as many people and as many resources. So we actually have been able to do a lot more than maybe when you look at the funds that we've had, we've been able to really leverage those in a much greater way. Now going forward, Troy mentioned that we're trying to keep OMOP, which is our largest project right now, sort of intact as we move it in 2013, and we do have fundraising plans that will maintain that through 2013, but we are now looking at new models, going to companies that are not necessarily regulated industry but might have an interest in some of the health-related things that we're doing. So we're trying to now expand into looking at new sources of funding beyond maybe the traditional, and so you'll see more about that coming down the road as well.
Thanks, Pam.
If I could just make another point, and Sally reminded me of it, and I think it's an important one about what this work really, at the end of the day, is all about. And it really is about the consumer. And I think Kay made an excellent point, that we talk a lot here about FDA, and we talk about public-private. But at the end of the day, everything FDA does is to serve the consumer. And these projects help FDA do that better. And Kay's example was just an excellent one, I thought, of how this will help FDA do its job better as we all look at it. But there are enormous opportunities for all of us together to help the consumer benefit from this work. And I think that's one of the really exciting things we shouldn't lose sight of.
Thank you. I think that's a great comment to conclude this meeting on. As you heard from Jane, we are very much trying to leverage resources, so we are looking for partnerships from, and you all could certainly be included in that as well, financially, in-kind contributions, those sorts of activities. We have a structure now that involves a core staff and then major functional pillars with specific projects within those, and that model is what we're going to try to continue to build out, all in keeping with the top public health priorities of the FDA and having the most impact on public health through better science. We look forward to further comments and input from all of you. We very much appreciate the input and the constructive suggestions, comments in this meeting. Remind you, or refer you again to our website and to the Reagan-Udall Foundation staff as resources for having that further contact. And thank you again for coming this morning.
I was at